Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another book review. I don't know why it looks a little different today. Why does it look different? Does it look different? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it does. Okay. Well, anyway, I'm just going to get started. So, hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to another video. Oh, something's wrong. Oh, no, maybe it's not. Okay. All right. Anyway, so what if an ordinary woman's life could ignite a national argument, changing dinner table conversations, splitting men and women, and pushing a bestseller past 1 million copies? So, hello, everybody. I'm Barry. This is Soul Book Club. And I'm reviewing two books today. Both books are written by Cho Nam-joo and translated by Jamie Chang. And the first book is Kim Jiyoung, born 1982. And then I'll review Saha. So the first one is Kim Jiyoung, born 1982, and this novel was published in Korea in 2016, and it quickly became a zeitgeist-capturing hit, often credited with crystallizing public debate around everyday sexism and the Me Too era in Korea. It sold over 1 million copies. It was it was obviously a very big hit. And it's been translated into lots of languages, and the English edition was published in 2020. It was also adapted into a 2019 film starring Chong Yu-mi and Gong Yu, and it was a hit at the box office and had over 3 million admissions. So, what's the book actually about, and why? Why did it have such a significant impact in Korea? So the novel tells Kim Ji-young's life story from childhood into her 30s. It uses the framing device of sessions with a psychiatrist after she has suffered a mental breakdown. And much of the book essentially reads like the doctor's sort of cool professional record of her experiences. And in spare, mostly unadorned prose, Cho traces Jiyoung's growing awareness of sexism and discrimination and shows how a supposedly ordinary life can be squeezed by a patriarchal system at home, at school, at work, and in marriage. And reviewers at the time, one of the main thing, or one of the things that people talked about or commented on was this use of footnotes and statistics. And this was sort of used as evidence that Ji-young is not an exception but a pattern. And at the time, I had a colleague who uncharitably likened the novel to a Wikipedia page entry. Because of this use of footnotes and statistics. But anyway, why was this book so popular? What exactly was it about Kim Ji-young that appealed to so many readers? So coming to the novel after years of the hype and controversy might can feel a little strange because it's really quite simple on the surface. It's not a difficult novel. It's not structurally flashy. And in fact, you could argue that without that frame, it really is just kind of an extended, like a reported essay or something. But this sort of singularity of purpose, I think, is exactly what a lot of readers connected with. So the book names this very banal, everyday misogyny that's just woven into the fabric of modern life. And it also sparked very sort of contentious debate and a public backlash even when there was a member of a K-pop band called Red Velvet, and she sort of commented that she'd read this book or she was a fan of it. And so there were some sort of videos posted online of people, I guess, male fans destroying the Red Velvet merchandise and things like that. So it really was very sort of contentious in the online space for a while. But how does Cho make this argument on page? What techniques is she using? So, like I said, the structure is very clear. There's this psychiatrist's frame at the beginning and end, and this invites comparisons to other Korean fiction that explores this sort of alienation and breakdown. So, think of something like Han Gang's The Vegetarian. And then Ji Young's life is divided into 4 discrete sections. We have childhood, adolescence, early adulthood, and then marriage, and each stage just showing specific and recognizable slights and barriers. So, for example, in childhood, we see the preference for sons and people soothing parents by saying things like don't the parents of daughters by saying things like don't worry, the next one will be a son, as long as the next one's a son. There's a scene, a part in the novel where her grandmother, Jiyoung's grandmother, smacks her hand for taking food that she says is reserved for her brother, and she feels this injustice very sharply. Sorry, excuse me. And a lot of reviews, or some of the reviews also pointed out the context, right? So this wasn't too far past the era when parents might check the sex of the fetus, because they had a preference for male babies, and so this sort of ugly reality is something the book doesn't gloss over. And throughout, Cho uses, like I said, these sort of footnotes. The footnotes refer to, surveys and statistics to reinforce this the idea that Ji-young's experience just tracks with general social data. It's not just her bad luck, right? This is a sort of a widespread phenomenon, even a universal one. And so there were, at the time, this really was much discussed, much written about novel. And so, what about these sort of headline grabbing kind of issues, right? How does she handle some of these sort of very contentious issues that are discussed in the media in Korea? Sorry, excuse me. I still have a bit of a sore throat just now. So the workplace sections will be very familiar to lots of people. They're quite striking. So Ji-young faces these sort of interview questions that male candidates wouldn't get asked. She endures the sort of general, everyday, casual misogyny. There's an incident involving a spy cam incident. These are referred to as molka incidents in Korea, and this is when a hidden camera is placed in a restroom, and then these images are shared online. Very, very unpleasant. And Cho recounts this in this sort of clinical and just factual tone, which in a way, if you compare it to something like The Vegetarian, which is obviously very sort of self-consciously literary, but just this sort of clinical, almost bland tone, in a way makes the mundanity of it makes it kind of more shocking in a way, or more disturbing, perhaps. But anyway, this sort of cool voice just keeps relating these examples of a sort of systemic that these things are just sort of embedded in the system. And then there's also some memorably unpleasant things about in the motherhood section. So you not only have this idea that it's just near impossible to balance a career and having a family, having a child, but there's a scene later where Ji-young is sitting in a park with her young daughter, drinking a coffee, and she overhears some other adults sort of sneering, and they refer to her as a mom roach, like a cockroach, a mom roach. And she thinks, my routine, my career, my dreams, my entire life, myself, I gave it all up to raise our child, and I've become vermin. What do I do now? And, it really distills down just the sort of thesis of the book into this very unpleasant concept, right? So what paths are truly open to women, and what do those choices cost? So, does the culture around the book line up with the data it cites and suggests? So, unhappily, a lot of it does. So, Korea has very widely reported that it has a significant gender pay gap, and that sort of context helps explain why this really quite short novel struck such a nerve, and why discussions around it remain heated. Sorry, excuse me. I do have a I do still have a bit of a sore throat. Anyway, okay, so should we still read Kim Ji-young, born 1982 now? Yes, we should. So it's a short, sharp, and consequential novel. So whether you appreciate its clarity or you might find it a little didactic, even if you're reading it, it's become a touchstone in contemporary Korean literature in general, and just in sort of Korean public debate and contemporary culture in general. If you've seen the 2019 film, it's slightly different, right? There are some changes which kind of might change your reading. So if you have seen the film, it's definitely worth reading the book as well. Like I said, it is quite short. So anyway, that was Kim Ji-young, born 1982, and if that novel shows how an ordinary, every woman is sort of struggles against everyday sexism, what happens when the lens widens from one individual to an entire city? So this is another book from Cho Nam-joo. It has the same sort of cool, detached clarity, but scaled up in size. So let's step into Saha. Okay, so this was the follow-up novel. So what if your postcode decided your rights? In Saha, a walled housing block sits inside a gleaming corporate city-state. If you live in Saha, you're disposable and you're never meant to leave. So Saha is Cho's second novel to be translated into English. And this followed the runaway success of the previous book, Kim Ji-young. And as such, Saha was much anticipated when it was published in Korean in 2019, and also when its English translation followed in 2022. And Saha explores similar themes to Cho's previous work, but expands on them quite significantly. So, this is a story about the damaging effects of capitalism on the individual and a dystopian critique of inequality and class repression. And it's a novel that very much echoes other works published by Korean writers in recent years. So you can make some comparisons with things like The Disaster Tourist and various other things. But anyway, Saha is a worthy addition to this small genre of dystopian Korean novels critiquing capitalism, and it's a novel that I'm sure many readers will enjoy discussing. So this is a growing trend among Korean writers of using sci-fi or dystopian settings to critique inequalities in modern society. And I've reviewed several stories and novels in recent months that use these sort of near future settings to explore the damaging impact of excessive consumerism and the growing power of corporations. And so, how does Cho introduce readers to these issues in Saha? So, the way the novel begins, it actually sets up a murder mystery. And I think, some readers, you might expect this murder mystery to be followed a bit more closely than it is. A young man wakes up in a car beside his girlfriend. His girlfriend is dead. The man's memories are foggy. He can't remember exactly what has transpired. So he flees the scene of the crime. This young man is Do-kyung, and he is a resident of the Saha estates. And Cho uses this murder mystery setup as a hook to introduce us to the residents of the Saha estates. And while that murder mystery element is woven into the story, it is not Cho's primary focus. The Saha Estates is a sort of dilapidated apartment block on the fringes of town. Town, and yes, that's the name of this place, just town. Town is a wealthy kind of mega city that essentially acts as a country run by a corporation controlled by anonymous bureaucrats and councillors. And the residents of town comprise two types of people. So you have the wealthy L1s who have a permanent residence, and then the L2s are allowed to live and work in the city based on a visa system. And then the residents of Saha are the underclass who don't qualify for visas and are instead forced to live in squalor and are exploited for their labor in a difficult, dangerous, and dirty jobs. And so Cho's novel jumps from character to character to describe the lives of the Saha residents. I'm sorry, excuse me. So there's several characters in the story, and she uses these characters, the residents of Saha, and their individual stories of repression and exploitation. And she's kind of asking, is it possible for people disenfranchised like this to make any kind of a stand against this sort of faceless bureaucratic structure and the ultra corporatized government that controls everything around them? So many readers will, of course, be familiar with this type of dystopian narrative and everything from 1984 to Hunger Games, and even things like Squid Game. And so is Cho bringing anything new to the table here? So there are certainly familiar elements in this novel, and it might ultimately not weave those elements into something entirely original. But nevertheless, it is quite a powerful work. There's lots of elements and strands that are thought-provoking. And one of the strong points, I think, is in showing this constrained aspect, the constrained lives of the Saha residents and how their opportunities for everything, relationships, work, family, even giving birth, and just existing in general, are entirely set by this sort of wealthy group of people who are indifferent to their lives and suffering. In fact, the affluent residents of a town, these sort of rich people in town, they need this group of impoverished and exploited people just to keep their society functioning. And so that dynamic is portrayed very well in the novel. Another interesting factor. So the Korean version of Saha was published in 2019. So 2019, this was obviously before the outbreak of COVID-19. And this is interesting because the novel has a plot about a pandemic and the government's response to that pandemic. So how does Cho incorporate this into the story? This is a very interesting aspect of the book. I might not say too much about this, actually. I'm not sure how much you're allowed to say, but I was amazed that it predated COVID because it so clearly mirrors things that happened in various parts of the world, going into, well, various places like Australia and Britain, in response to COVID-19. So the way the virus spreads, the lockdowns, the burden on medical professionals, and various other things. And it's genuinely uncanny how much it mirrors what transpired in the years just after this novel was published. And I think it shows that there was an awareness somewhere that something like this was possible, or on the cards, and how it would likely unfold, and that it was probable, or even likely that it might happen again in the future. Again, this isn't the novel's main focus, but it is an example of this insightful Cho can be in her writing. Okay. My final thoughts. So this, like I said, the novel isn't entirely successful. Some of the elements are very familiar. I think it lacks a little bit of focus, like in the final stretch, in the conclusion, it shifts gears quite noticeably into a different type of storytelling. It seems a little awkward. Given the story that's preceded it, don't think everything comes together quite well. It's without a doubt a messy novel, but it is interesting in terms of social commentary. Her vision of this society is interesting, has some compelling things to say, and her writing can be very effective. So overall, I think it is worth reading. It's a good pick for a book club. Lots of things to discuss, a lot that connect to things that are happening in the world at the moment. And just one final thing I want to say about this. So I've been reading James Burnham recently, and when I came to see, sorry, I'm covered in cat hair or something. And when I was editing my Saha review here, I first reviewed this a couple of years ago on a radio show. So when I was editing this, I couldn't help noticing some echoes of Burnham's ideas. So very briefly, I don't want to whitter on about this too much, but Burnham argues that modern societies drift from rule by owners to rule by a managerial class, right? A managerial elite. And these are technocrats, right? Are there any technocrats that are running things at the moment that you can think of? Bureaucrats and administrators. And planners. And these people exercise power through bureaucracy, procedures, and credentialed expertise rather than outright ownership. And their authority shows up as forms, sort of qualifications, their professional credentials, compliance checks, and safety protocols. And this makes their this is how they use power and make people manageable, manage society. And that's kind of the logic of town in Saha, right? You have these faceless ministers, these sort of corporate departments, and they govern via paperwork, right? You have IDs and visas and these sort of eligibility tiers. So you have the L1s, the L2s, the Saha residents, and everyday life is sort of controlled and steered and facilitated by checkpoints and audits and risk management. And even the pandemic thread has quarantines and heightened medical regulations and research on the least protected and the most affected. And all of this reads like managerial power justifying itself by using the language of public health. It's for your own good, so it is. And the result here isn't a sort of feudal brutality so much as administrative violence. The center stays clean by sort of exporting the costs out to the unfortunate residents of Saha. Does that sound familiar? Anyway, in other words, it's kind of, maybe not. It doesn't map on exactly. There's definitely some elements of a sort of Burnham style managerialism, sort of filtered through a Korean dystopia. Anyway, that's all I'll say about that. But if Kim Ji-young, born 1982, is about the everyday sexism, then Saha scales up to the systems that affect everybody, right? Affect human lives in general. So it has a very clear moral lens, and it has, like I've said, this unusually, well, not unusual, but just it has this bureaucratic approach to dystopia. You do see that in other dystopian fiction as well, and it has a quietly devastating question. So, what if your address was the only thing that the system needed to know about you to place you in society? What if that defined everything about you? So anyway, what if you've read these books, what hit you the hardest? Was it the tier system, the pandemic echoes, or was it the way was it how these policies damage people? And if you read Kim Ji-young, which scene hit you the hardest? Was it the job interview scene? Was it the park scene where she's called a cockroach? Was it the framing with the psychiatrist? So let me know in the comments. And if these reviews were useful, hit the like button or the subscribe button, and I'll try and do another review sometime soon. I actually noticed that Cho Nam-joo has a story in the Asia Publishers Collection, which I haven't reviewed yet. I'm about halfway through the Asia Publishers series, so at some point I will try and get round to reading the rest of the stories. But anyway, thank you for watching, and it's the only video I'm doing today. But I'll try and make another one tomorrow. So take care. All the best. See you next time.